All right, and here we are for the end of October live stream. As always, people, both in the video chat and then also, of course, in the live chat here. Please let me know if you can hear me okay, so that we don't get started with me being muted or something. All right, let's see. All right. It's everyone is saying this is all good. So let's do it. So yeah, like I said, it's the end of October live stream. I'm sure most of you know the drill, know the deal. But for those who don't, I usually these days actually start with some leaks, some last minute things I've been hearing over the past few days just to open it all up. And then I roll through questions that were pre-submitted from the Moore's Law is Dead patrons, which of course, if you join, you can get access to submitting multiple questions for free ahead of time that I will then prepare for. Like almost every live stream, I actually have a question from the patrons before I go live that I reach out to a source about and go, hey, is this actually true? This person's asking me, this one thing about, about like supply for this 9800 X3D. Do you think that's going to keep coming? And I'll get to that in a second. And so just remember that's there for you. The best way to support the channel is on Patreon. But otherwise, I also, of course, appreciate tips. If you put a tip, you can put out a question in the live chat that I will be much more likely to notice and answer as well. And I just go back and forth between those. But like I said, I think we should start with the leak. Let me put down a timestamp here because this is actually a very, very big deal, people. Basically, yeah, I've already, I believe, talked about Nvidia wanting to make CPUs for years, actually. I think I was actually one of the first people to be very outspoken that I was hearing Nvidia was going to enter the CPU market in a big way. I mean, consumer CPU market in a decently big way. But, now I think there was like a report out of Reuters, and other outlets, I think maybe Digitime, saying that, no, it's really, really, really happening and maybe soon. And I was told by a couple of sources, well, one source reached out to me that works with NVIDIA and said, yeah, it is happening. And another person who works at NVIDIA, I reached out to them and they went, that is correct. Your other source is right. So let me get right to that now. And then let me zoom in a little bit here. And let me just adjust that ever so slightly. Sorry, it got bumped a little bit before I started. All right, zoom in a little more. Okay. So, yep, let me get into it. The first source told me, and this person is a partner with NVIDIA, that they can tell me firsthand that they are planning to launch an ARM-based APU to thin and light laptops within a couple of years. Preliminary info is that it's targeting up to 80 watts, and that NVIDIA is at least partnering with Dell. And I say at least because they could be partnering, and they almost certainly are with other people, but they are partnering with Dell closely to make an Alienware NVIDIA exclusive laptop that is built to the metal for the NVIDIA chip. Now, I want to be clear about why. Let me see here. Oh no. Let me just move back over to me. I accidentally pressed a button that forgot where I had pre-saved the location. Sorry if I look a bit goofy right now for doing this here. Zoom out. And then I want to clarify why that's a big deal too, because it's not just like NVIDIA's making an APU, and then is like, all right, hopefully OEMs use it, kind of like Qualcomm. Not to say that Qualcomm didn't work with them closely on laptop designs. Of course, Qualcomm did, but like NVIDIA wants to make sure some of these first laptops that launch with their APU are built from the ground up to best utilize NVIDIA's SoC. So expect really tailored premium special designs. And I know for a fact that there will be a special edition Dell Alienware version of it. Now, let us get back to the leak here. So I took this information from an NVIDIA partner confirming, around 80 watts is what they're looking for. There's going to be a Dell, Alienware laptop. And someone at NVIDIA confirmed that they are working on a consumer APU and that it is a very serious project. It actually sounds more serious to me than, and I will show this here. Let me see. The AMD Soundwave leak that I did months ago, like where I leaked that AMD is working on an ARM APU, that it's very powerful. It's expected to probably release in 2026 or later, but that it's a project that they're taking seriously, but they're not 100% sure how serious or, it should be. Like, does it need to come out right away? Should we table it for a while? And this is different from NVIDIA because Nvidia is very serious, apparently. Very, very serious. So serious that they're trying to rush this thing out by late, and this is what blew me away, late 2025 or even 2026, because they want to get this to the market before Soundwave is out, meaning that this might even end up competing with Strix Halo. And they're gonna have a huge focus on gaming, probably a bigger focus on gaming than AMD will with Strix Halo at first, and then of course also for creators. And it is going to, and none of this is a big surprise, but someone at Nvidia directly told me it is going to have a powerful NPU. Yes, they are concerned about ARM on Windows, but they're putting a ton of effort into it, and they feel like they're confident that by the time Qualcomm's had their ARM on Windows, X Elite out for a while, that they'll be able to piggyback off of that and make their software even better than Qualcomm's was. So they're concerned. They're concerned that it won't be that easy to get perfect ARM on Windows implementation with their APU, but they are pouring money into it, and they want this thing out soon. This seems to be getting a lot of buzz within Nvidia right now. And I want to speak about that a little bit more because I think it's obvious to me, because I'd heard that Nvidia wants to make consumer CPUs eventually, of course. But it sounds like in the past, I'd say 2 months, a project they already had to make an APU just went into hyperdrive. Like, there's no way they just decided to do this now, and but I think something happened when they saw how bad Intel's doing. This is my theory here. This isn't from a source. This is my theory that Nvidia went, by the end of next year, Intel may be in free fall, and there's going to be a vacuum left by that in the laptop market. And they're seeing AMD become more and more competitive, take more and more market share in laptop. They're seeing Qualcomm lay the groundwork for good ARM on Windows, or Windows on ARM. I hope I didn't say it the other way before too. Windows on ARM. They're seeing them lay the groundwork, but they fumbled, and they're like, so Qualcomm fumbled, Intel's falling apart, AMD's taking market share. Are we really going to let AMD just take the whole laptop market? I mean, why shouldn't we get a piece of the pie? And so this thing's coming, and it's coming faster than expected. And to anyone that thinks it would be too crazy to come out by like Christmas next year, I don't know. Nvidia ported Maxwell from 20 nanometer to 28 nanometer when that node fell apart. I was told in like 8 or 10 months, and no, that's something you just never see. So this is one of those things where I think Nvidia is just going hard. When it comes to performance, I might get more information on that soon. But what I would say is I would tentatively expect Nvidia to position their first APU, laptop APUs this way. Like, the CPU obviously won't be as strong as Strix Halo, but I imagine they'll give it enough brute force with standard like ARM, off-the-shelf ARM cores with maybe a little bit of tweaking, that it will be argued to be good enough. And then they're probably going to give this thing something. I wouldn't be surprised if this was like a 5070, and not a laptop one, like a full 5070 type thing in there. Now, this is speculation. I do not know the performance yet, but that would be my suspicion. Well, maybe not 5070, somewhere between 5060 and 5070, something that firmly beats Strix Halo, and then have a really powerful NPU, make it efficient. And NVIDIA's pitch will be pretty simple. Yeah, AMD's CPU is stronger, but we're going to keep innovating. The next generation will be better. But, if you're looking at two laptops here, one with Strix Halo and one with whatever I might find out the code name soon, we'll see, but whatever this NVIDIA APU is the CPU being like 50% better or something, is that really worth more than an NVIDIA GPU with a DLSS and a stronger NPU and better software integration? Like, that's what NVIDIA's argument is going to be. And then after that, they'll try to catch up in CPU as best they can, but always leveraging the fact that they kill it in AI and gaming performance to sell these things. So that is what's going on. It's real. It's not just real. It's apparently coming out within 2 years, maybe even within 13 months or something. Like, I would say it sounds like Nvidia is at least targeting CES 2026. And that's just crazy to me. They're doing this quickly, but it makes sense when you see how much Intel's falling apart. I know that Jensen sniffs opportunity. If there was ever a time to get into the market, it would be right when Intel's falling apart and Qualcomm were the soldiers on D-Day that got mowed down here. Like, and then Nvidia's like, thanks for taking the beachhead. Now we're going to finish the software and we're going to do better. Now is the time for them to push for this, especially before AMD gets Soundwave out and really gets a foothold with like Zen 6 Medusa or something. So I hope you enjoyed that leak. All right, let me move on to other matters of business. Again, we'll probably just be doing this for like another hour. It's been a very long week here. I've got a funeral to go to tomorrow. So if you have a tipped question, please put it in now so I can keep track of them and answer them soon. Let's see here. All right, so now let's get into AMD and Arrow Lake supply and sales. So the 9800X 3D, of course, came out. It's as incredible as I said it would be. It's actually maybe even more incredible than from what I saw from some of the reviews that I talked about in the recent Broken Silicon. And it's selling really, really well. And there is a boatload of supply. Now, it's funny. I always have to do this, but because I've seen some people, I actually haven't seen too much of it. I've mostly just been working, not paying that much attention to the news today outside of what I need to know. But I'm pretty sure, as usual, there's going to be some person in the UK that says there's no 9800X 3D supply. It's because you're in the UK, you're on an island, you're in a country that isn't as strong as some US, economically, as some US states. You're going to get 9800X 3D supply, guys. It's coming. Don't worry. But at least in the United States, it's massive. And as always, I feel like people just don't have a memory. Like almost every tech launch comes to the US, maybe sometimes Japan first, and then it filters through Europe about a week later. It's coming, and the supply is absolutely massive from what I'm told. I'm also told that this thing is just flying off the shelves, like just absolutely flying off the shelves. So don't worry if it's not in your country or town yet. It is coming, and they have made a ton of these. Woody Chang writes in and says, as the 9800X 3D appears to have sold out everywhere on day one, I actually still see it in stock on Micro Center. Let me just check, right? And keep in mind, any place where it's sold out, at least in the US, there are a lot of them, like a lot of them. Yeah, so it's still in stock at Micro Center, at least in Marietta, Georgia. I guess let me check, like Michigan. I used to go to this Micro Center when I lived in Detroit. Still in stock there. And it comes with free RAM. I don't know. I might even get the 9800X 3D. I mean, geez. Sorry, I'm just blown away at that deal. Anyways, let me continue this person's question. What is your sense of supply for that part given Black Friday? Cyber Monday is only a few weeks away. I have a feeling in the US people will want to upgrade sooner because of tariffs. I agree. You should upgrade sooner because of that. Before prices really start to get high. And that's probably another reason AMD is rushing so many of these into the United States. Think of it. Why else would AMD be rushing the 9800X 3D with extra priority into the US instead of other places? Because of the tariffs that are probably coming, people. So, of course, it's coming there first. But it's going to come everywhere else, and there's going to be a lot of it. I hear the supply should keep coming. I don't really have much else to add besides that. Chris just writes in and says, let's say that you got a 9800X 3D for playing games with your 4090. Would you overclock it as much as possible to get every last frame out of it? Or do you underclock it to see how much you could reduce the power consumption without significantly affecting the frame rates? I think what I would do is overclock it with PBO. Like first I would take off the power limit, turn up my fans, and see where I could get it to. Because I would definitely want to see if you get all core 5.5 gigahertz, single core 5.7, something like that. And then once I get there, I would put a power cap at like sustained 120 watts. The idea being, okay, I want this thing to boost higher if it can. I'm going to overclock it. And then what am I going to do? I'm going to say, you can boost to 200 watts or whatever if you need to briefly, but most of the time, keep it cool and quiet. And in games, it doesn't really seem to need to use more than like 100 watts anyways. So I know that wouldn't be an issue. And that's the same thing I actually did with my RTX 4090. I overclocked it. I think I got it to almost just hit 3 gigahertz consistently. I think it was at like 2.98 gigahertz. I overclocked the RAM a ton by like 10%. And then I said, don't use more than 350 watts. And my 4090 outperforms the stock one by about 10%. Well, again, not going over 350 watts. So that's what I like to do these days, at least with overclocking. What's the limit? All right. If you need to, do it, but don't do it for long enough that you're going to heat up my room too much. That's how I tend to handle things now. All right. Now let's move on briefly, because I don't think there's going to be that much to say about this, to the Arrow Lake supply situation. Arrow Lake supply is god awful. I mean, and this is where I think there's some armchair commentators online that really have no clue what they're doing and don't get how how you need to look at both sides of an equation. From what I am told, Arrow Lake supply is just almost non-existent. That's the paper launch, but nobody is noticing because no one wants Arrow Lake. And I mean, talking to some people at like Best Buys and Micro Centers, I'm told that there's multiple locations where not a single Arrow Lake CPU has sold all week one. Like that, like, and even some of these locations got like one CPU and it's still there. So yeah, Arrow Lake has just ceded do it yourself to AMD, maybe forever. I don't know, at least for the next 2 years, I think. It's really, 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 really bad. Bang for a Buck writes in and says, "Hey Tom, just an FYI, Mind Factory could not have sold any Core Ultra CPUs because they weren't stocking them. WCCF Tech did, like always, not do any research when they quoted that Mind Factory didn't sell a single unit." Yeah, I didn't know that. I should really probably stop quoting the clown show that doesn't do any research. But he says, "By the way, as far as I know, they are available since today and have sold 30 despite being ultra shit." Well, 30 is still horrible week one sales, guys. But um, yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to throw that correction in here because I did kind of miss that. But speaking of something that is kind of like Mind Factory, but it is in the United States, Micro Center is the sponsor of this piece of content. If you're looking to get a 9800X 3D and you're in the United States, good Lord, go to Micro Center. They give you 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 for free with it. I honestly might do it because I looked it up. The 9800X 3D, especially if you overclock it, can beat Zen 3 16 core in multi-threading. I'm still using my 5950X. I might just get a 9800X 3D. I don't need more multi-threading performance, really. I just want everything to be faster. And wow, it is. So, but there's also other great deals as well. I mean, let me look at what else is going on. I wonder if they're still dropping in price there. Uh no, so you can even get like the 9950X for $570. I believe. Like, what's the 5700X 3D at? That's one of the craziest ones. Yeah, it's $180 for the 5700X 3D. Although, really, I think that my favorite one, let me see, what's the 7700 selling for right now there? Oh, no, not the 7700 XT. Okay, so that doesn't come with free RAM, but I think the 7700X does. Yeah, the 7700X is 250 and it comes with 32 gigabytes of RAM. I really love that for a budget system. So, you know, they're doing their fall savings event right now. They've got tons of CPU bundles. Like, they'll give you money off if you get a motherboard with it as well. You can sign up for early access to Micro Center Santa Clara. Another store is opening. They're opening tons of them. They'll give you a free flash drive if you do that. And they've, of course, got their updates and reviews and guide center at Micro Center News. Please check the links in the description. Click on those links if you want to build a new system. Do it now at Micro Center to support the channel because they've really supported us really well. And I think you should support good sponsors that make all of this possible. So yeah, check out Micro Center today. All righty, so I've gotten through the leaks. I've gotten through the ads. I need to tell you, there's over 1,200 of you watching. Like the video, share the video. Make sure you're subscribed to the Moore's Law Z YouTube channel. Let's get to over 1,000 likes since over 1,000 of you are watching. I got a tip question here about X3D, so let's get actually just right back to that. Denver Basshead writes in and says, "Is the X3D naming the best thing AMD marketing has ever come up with? It's a synonymous with the best gaming CPU now." I think that was a very effective. Yeah, I think that was effective. I think you already had X at the name of stuff, 5800X, and they added 3D. Everyone gets that. 3D, what does that mean? I mean, it at least makes them Google it. Why is it called 3D? And what do people do? They'll look it up and they'll say, "Oh, it's 3D stacked. Oh, wow, it's so advanced." Yeah, I think that was very good naming. It's the type of naming that I wish AMD would have applied to Strix. I really do not get this ridiculous AI9 Max blah 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 crap. I do get why they're doing it. They want it to sound like Intel or Apple so that people compare them. But I really think just staying with the standard naming, like calling the what is it, the AI9 HX370. I think they should have just called it the what is it, 945 HX or AI or something. Just put AI at the end instead of X. Or like, and I think that would have been less odd and confusing to people. I don't think it matters as much in laptop, but yeah, it is definitely probably the least silly naming thing AMD's ever done. Is just put 3D at the end. I wish marketing would do more things like that at the company. Let me see. Got another tip. Mexi Man and Cheese writes in, "Thank God X3D came out before the AI boom. we might have been stuck with the XAI. It's true. I mean, if it would have happened during the AI boom, um, which I think we're all a little surprised, right? The night is young. They may change their mind, but we've still seen AMD at least not go with AI. It seems for the successor to RDNA. They'll stick with UDNA, maybe just keeping that lineage. But God, I think we all know that we're worried they're going to call it the RNAi generation. And it's funny because think about where RDNA came from. Elizabeth Holmes, like that is where RDNA came from. Like, just what was that then? 5 years ago, everything was DNA. And so AMD had to call it RDNA. It's just so silly. And I wish they'd stop doing stuff like that because these things come and go as buzzwords. All right, so that is my 9800 X3D information there. I think before I get to the PlayStation 5 Pro analysis, let's just roll through. Yeah, no, let's get to the PS5 Pro because that came out. I have it in the title. Let me put down a time stamp here. And then of course change my oh so fancy lights. All right. So, yeah, the PS5 Pro is out. I haven't had a chance to test it yet, so I'm just going off of what I've seen, mostly honestly from NX Gamer, which is really how I have to start this. NX Gamer, he's an incredibly great, and he does incredibly great analysis of all gaming hardware, both console and PC. Check out his YouTube channel. I think I have the link in the description for his review. He's going to be the next guest on Broken Silicon, so we'll put out questions for that tonight. So if you're a member of the Patreon, you can ask him questions about that and everything else. He really is going to be really good at commentating about Zen 5 and Air Lake performance as well. He's really, I know what he does personally. Of course, I'm not going to say it because he wants to keep it private, but he really is like he's up there in the, engineering with silicon. I'll say he really does know his stuff. We're so lucky that he actually manages to take the time to test these things. But based on his testing, I was fairly impressed. I think that my early impression of the PS5 Pro is, look, it works. It's good. It seems to actually be selling well at the last minute here. And we need more updates to games to fully leverage it. But it's definitely better than the PS4 Pro was for its time, at least in terms of like what it does. We can talk about price performance. Maybe that'd be a different conversation because the PS4 Pro, sure, it ran all games a little better, but it didn't try to. It just was like a fluke sometimes. And the PS5 Pro actually puts in some effort for even PS4 games and stuff like that as well. It's a little effort. It's like, yep, we have this PS4 game you booted up. It's going to have better sharpening and upscaling to a higher resolution, kind of. The frame rates will be even more stable, but that's really all we can do because of how it was coded, whereas the PS4 Pro, half of the games didn't do anything that much better. And like, what really was most interesting to me, and again, check out this link in the description, was he demonstrated, I thought, that in several games, it was definitely outperforming the 6800. But it really depends what you're doing. Like Alan Wake 2 in a scene, he seemed to show like the 6800 with ray tracing on was struggling at like 24 frames a second. Now, it's locked at 30 because I don't know why this dev locked it at 30. I still can't believe devs ever do that now. But it was just locked. And so it's running at least 20% faster, at least. So I think it's pretty much right on the mark that this thing's really, if it's heavy ray tracing, it's going to be around like an 8700 XT probably. Well, it's hard because it's like, yeah, but that's only because of the ray tracing. I don't know. And then, in some games where it's not well optimized, a little better than the 6800. And probably, yeah, you call it a 7800 XT half the time. What's really interesting in his testing, though, something that stood out to me a ton, and he says he's going to do more testing on it, and I really would like to see it, is he said in Dragon's Dogma, the PS5 Pro was less CPU bottlenecked than a 5600X with a 6800, proving that like there is something there with like programming to the metal and not needing as powerful of a CPU. Because I remember in his early analysis, he was actually comparing the PS5 Pro CPU to, not in raw performance, but in realized performance in a game, almost like having a 5700X. And I thought that was odd, but he showed examples. It was clearly less CPU bottleneck than PC versions with stronger CPUs. So I think that really warrants more testing. I thought that was really, really interesting. And that's really it. But there's not much to say about the PS5 Pro. I mean, it's PS5 with more storage that runs games faster. And if it's really optimized, you'll see games, I think like F1, just like You'll see some games will just double frame rates to 4K 120 with ray tracing. Other games will be like 50% faster if they didn't really put any effort into it. And that's really, I think, what we should have expected. But, it's very early. I haven't spent that much time looking at it, so don't kill me. I have to look at more stuff. And the next broken silicon is really when you're going to get my full opinion on it, especially if I can test it myself, because then I can tell you what I think from firsthand experience. Kenahoon 25 writes in and says, it seems like something is off with the Pro. From leaks, the PS5 Pro should be 45% or more, but Digital Foundry said it's more like a 6800. I watched some of the Digital Foundry podcast. They literally showed parts where it was 50% or faster in games that weren't that optimized. So I don't know where you're getting that from. Redo your math there. Maybe games aren't taking full advantage of the console yet. I think that's definitely true, and I think it depends on the games you're looking at. So it seems like it's easy with the PS5 Pro to, find a game where they didn't really do anything. If you don't do anything, then it's like, well, the CPU is 10% faster, and the GPU, if you do literally nothing, is at least 35 to 45% faster. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of games that did that, but I don't know I just skimmed through a couple parts of it, so I don't know if they said it's like a 6800. That is not what I've seen from other people who actually have the console. Well, they have it, but that is not what I've seen from other people. That is not what I've been told by devs. I've had multiple devs who actually are programming that say this thing really can double frame rate. So no, it is not a 6800 in my opinion, and I don't know where that's coming from, especially when the data I saw from them seemed to suggest otherwise. But I didn't watch the whole podcast, so what can I say? I would suggest, I don't know how else to put this diplomatically, but like, didn't Digital Foundry take 4 years to admit the Xbox Series X wasn't stronger than the PS5, even though it was like screaming us in the face game after game after game that it was pretty much just the same performance, if not a little weaker than the PS5. So, it took them 4 years to come up with that. I think there might be a little bias there, or maybe you looked at one part of the review that completely contradicts with another part. New Kick writes in and says, what are you hearing about the future of Xbox? Do you think they will cancel? No, I don't think so. All their future hardware plans. No, that's not what I hear. I don't hear that Xbox is canceling everything yet. I would say if there was a recession, that might happen. Like if these mega corporations were forced to make hard cuts, like real hard cuts, I would guess Xbox is on the chopping block for sure at this point, but I've been told they're making more. I've been told they're making something. I just don't think it's going to try to compete with Sony directly anymore. Satya Nadella just said everything's going to be third party. He just openly said it. He's not even hiding anymore. And I think it was very telling that Satya Nadella said it and not Phil Spencer. Seems like Satya is now selling everything. Saying everything, not Phil. Where's Phil? I don't know. I think Phil's kind of not being consulted as much anymore. Because it just didn't pan out. And so I would say, unless there's a big recession, which who knows, I wouldn't say that's at all impossible in the short term, that we could see them kill it. But I shouldn't even say short term. I don't think it'd be short term. I think it'd be like in a year or two from now if there was a recession. But for now, I don't see one. And I don't think they're going to cancel making Xbox hardware. I just think if you are hoping, yeah, that's all I'll say. I've heard they're not canceling all Xbox hardware. So let's leave it at that and go that unless some black swan event happens or something crazy, I don't think they're going to give up on making some form of Xbox hardware just yet. All right, let's see. All right, let's move on to some more CPU questions. Actually, let me see what we got here. We got a couple tipped questions, so I should not have retracted ones. Okay. Let me make sure I get to this so I don't miss it. Error 0x7cf writes in and says, is there a chance of 32 gigabyte Battlemage on 256-bit? I think right. Yeah, I leaked 256, but you're saying, will they do a 32 gigabyte one? Intel is desperate and has nothing to cannibalize. It's true. XMX AI performance is competitive. Arc AI tooling is decent. I would buy 3. I guess if there was one thing Intel could desperately do to make people want to buy Battlemage is give it 32 gigabytes. But I don't know. I think it's just kind of the wrong. It's not. I shouldn't say wrong. It's not the ideal product to do that with. And let me explain what I mean by that. So and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but let's say potentially RDNA 4 completely knocks it out of the park. Like right now, I'm expecting somewhere between 7900 XT and 4080 performance. maybe even in ray tracing for the 4080 side of it. And that sounds good. It sounds like you could easily charge $500 to $600 from that. That'll help price performance more. Maybe catch up to Nvidia and feature parity almost entirely. But let's say it's a home run. Let's say it ends up 4080 Super or a little better. Let's say if it beats a 4080 Super by 5%, I would tell AMD to make a $700 32 gigabyte special edition, because at that point you're like, what, 10-20% behind the 5080. Give it more RAM. It's GDR6 as well. It's cheaper RAM than GDR7 with Blackwell. And then there's your consolation prize for people who have a 6900 XT and we're waiting to upgrade. And we're like, damn, I can't get RDNA 4 because I still have a 6900 XT. That's not that big of an uplift. But if it ended up being like a 50-60% uplift with doubling RAM, I think you could win over a lot of AMD enthusiasts that bought RDNA 2. But it would have to get to that level of performance. All right, now Battlemage. Why would you not want a special edition of Battlemage? I don't know, man, because what I basically hear is that it's somewhere between like what? Like I forgot what I leaked. Like 4060 Ti, 4070 Super performance between there. So maybe 4070. I mean, so you're weaker than a 7800 XT at that point, or probably around there. But you'll be competing with the 8700 XT or 8600 XT. The 8600 XT, I'm pretty sure, will be able to be sold for under $400. The reason I think like a top RDNA 4 getting 32 gigabytes, again, only if it hits a home run in performance to warrant it, could make sense, is because you're already going to charge $500 or $600. So throwing another $100 or more worth of RAM on it, you're still in the high end area. The problem with Battlemage is they're going to have to sell for 500 or less, I believe, maybe 400, and it'll be competing with $300 to $400 AMD cards, just like Alchemist did. I guess to put it another way, let's bring up Alchemist. Let's bring up the A770. That thing was sold at a loss, and Intel can't afford to do that anymore. And that was at $330. I mean, would it really have made sense for Intel to launch like a $500 32 gigabyte edition when it would be when it competed with the 6600 for half the price? I don't know. Again, though, the 8800 XT, if it's competing with a 5070 or beating it, in between there and a 5080, I'm not saying it will. It's a hypothetical. Well, then it's like, yeah, we're going to give it 32 gigabytes because we can still sell it for less than a 5080. So it's fine. But if Battlemage isn't going to be there, then it's like, so once you add 16 more gigabytes of RAM, what is it going to have to cost? $600, $500? They can't afford to sell it at a loss anymore, guys. They're out of money. And it's like, well, but then it'd be like the same price as a stronger AMD card, even if it had more RAM. I don't really see that going over well, So it's not the dumbest idea for them to do that, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, it would have to turn out pretty dang well, and they would have to be able to sell that for 500 or less, I think. Or like, who's the person buying this instead of the $400 AMD card that's stronger? I know it would have more RAM, but still, like who's actually going to do that? That would be my thoughts on it. Let me see here. Was there any other tipped questions? Yes. Let's see here. Buki talks that ish writes in and says, I believe from looking at the specs now that it's out, PS5 Pro is 6800 XTX. You mean 6800 XT, which is really pretty much close to a 7800 XT. Have more bandwidth than our features, 4070 and RT. Your thoughts? Again, I'm just deferring to NX Gamer for now because I haven't tested it myself, and I have only looked at it to a limited degree. But yes, that is what I would conclude about the PS5 Pro. Kind of, it seems to be like 6800 XT-ish raster, but 4070 Super ray tracing, maybe somewhere like there. Gustavius Twinkleberry writes in, Tom, why is your head so square? I don't know. I'm just a very, very German Western European boy, I guess. Actually, most people don't think I look that German sometimes, but my brother looks much more German than me, I would say. Let me see here. All right, let me get back to the other question. So that's that. We'll just leave that as its own section, actually, because I talked about that for a while. Let us get back to CPU talk here. Let's see. I'll save Kenneth your question for a second here. Low res. Wait, let me make sure we don't lose it too. All right. Low res gamer writes, and it says, one thing that I noticed in the hardware unboxed review of the 9800X 3D was in their power consumption charts, the 7800X 3D, consume significantly less power. I did see that for only about 10% less performance in the two games they sampled. Well, yeah, in those two games, but I think especially as Zen 5 ages and especially as like the 5090 comes out. I'm sorry. Some of the reviews, especially the ones that portrayed the 9800 X3D the worst. Like I don't know if this was one of the worst actually, but Tech Power Up found lower averages for sure than Gamers Nexus and Hardware Unboxed. I would look at that and I would go, I think they just are using more GPU bottlenecked testing settings. Like I think when the 5090 comes out, we're going to see this 9800 X3D pull ahead another 5 or 10% across the board. So I would point that out there though, that I would say no, the 9800 X3D really seems to be about 10 to 15% faster than 7800 X3D. But he says, is the 9800 X3D therefore really giving us anything more than a more generous power envelope and clocks versus the previous gen? Not to minimize the significant performance gains in some areas, but for the X3Ds, it seems like Zen 5% has become Zen to 5 to 10%. Now, it seems like it's become Zen 15% to me over time. It's just we need more modern games that leverage its instruction sets and architecture better, stronger GPUs to push these CPUs. Again, when the 7700X came out, it was trading blows with the 5800 X3D. Now it's just firmly ahead. I think the same thing's going to happen with Zen 5 and especially with the X3D variants. But I think you're minimizing when you bring up the power consumption thing what's been achieved here. You can say, "Oh, it uses 20 to 30% more power for 15% more performance. Is that really a big deal?" But it's like, yeah, but it's like I mean, come on. What in multi-threading wasn't it like 40, 50% more performance? Like I know it used more power to do that, but that wasn't even an option on the table with the previous gen. It was just, guess what? The 7800 X3D is going to be efficient because it has to be. We can't clock it faster. Too bad. It's not like it was it's like it was a choice. Techia City talked about this with Arrow Lake, actually. It's like when people are like, well, at least Arrow Lake's efficient. Is it? You can find scenarios where it's actually really not that much better than Raptor Lake in like gaming power consumption. Or if you push power, it loses to Zen 5. It doesn't really beat it in efficiency. It actually loses to that. The only reason Arrow Lake looks efficient is because they can't clock it higher and they had to tell you something. That's what happened with the 7800 X3D to a much more cheery and less depressing extent, in a less negative way, I should say. But like the fact that a 9800 X3D now is beating the 12 core 7900 in multi-threading, matching the 5950X 16 core in multi-threading, I'm sorry, it's fine. The way I put it, I believe is like in the Moore's Law said Discord in a conversation is what AMD has done today with the 9800 X3D is they made an 8 core match a 4-year-old 16 core in multi-threading while using the same level of power and then beat it by like just double the performance in gaming. An 8 core is a 16 core in multi-threading, even efficiency wise, and it doubles its gaming performance 4 years later. That's incredible. That's just incredible. You've got an 8 core that is better than like the 16 core Zen 2 in multi-threading. That's insane. So no, I think yes, it uses more power to get the multi-threading performance, but don't forget that this isn't a $700. I mean, the 5950X was $800 fucking dollars, guys. Now with less silicon, they've managed to give you $800 16 core performance. That's what it used to cost for $480 in an 8 core. They've done more with less. That you use the same amount of power to get there. I think that's still an incredible achievement. Dark Side of the Force writes in and says, since Strix Halo uses the same CPU die as desktop Ryzen, any chance they chuck 3D Vcache on it to do a maxed out, souped up version of it? I think there might be some grounds in that since Craft Computing benchmarked the 4070 Ti shows still massive 1% uplift. Not to mention with the 9800 X3D review, seemingly only downside to X3D now is the cost of adding the Vcache. Yeah, I pretty sure they can use Vcache with Strix Halo, and I think they should because now Nvidia is coming for their lunch in laptop late next year, if not 2026, and they've got it. They're trying to establish a new platform with Strix Halo. Like this is quite an ask. They're like, hey, you need to use a new socket to really leverage Halo well. You need to build a laptop perfectly around it. I'm told they are reaching out to OEMs and really trying to help them with that too, by the way. And you got to win by as much as you can to make it obvious that this is the way forward for consumers. They're going to walk into stores and go, "Oh, AMD's making Apple-like chips. Is it worth it?" So my advice, obviously, this is my advice. Like, what am I going to say? No, don't do it. But yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense to put Vcache on the top models to just make it so clear this is a great product that you want. That is what, and just maximize efficiency as well. And I think there's a real argument that AMD could make too. Like, so I want to get into this Strix Halo segmentation a little more, actually, because this is something I keep dwelling on this week. Um, I know that it's unfortunate that Strix Halo isn't launching this year. If it launched this year, it would be compared to the laptop 4070. It would be, wow, AMD brings you 4070 performance in an APU. Well, now it's going to be competing with Blackwell. What does that mean? Probably it's going to be competing with the RTX 5060 laptop edition. It might beat it, but it'd be less of a it's a 5070 moment. Um, but AMD might give you 32 gigabytes of unified or even 64 or 128 gigabytes of unified RAM. And were they to also include Vcache, I think you could make the argument this is still the better gaming chip, right? Because it sounds like Intel might actually pair Blackwell with Raptor Lake because of it contracts with Intel to get an Intel sticker that I don't know if they realize isn't really a valuable sticker anymore. Um, and because Arrow Lake sucks and is too expensive and no one wants it. Like, I'm hearing it pretty bad things about it from OEMs, by the way, that they hate Arrow Lake. They might just sell more Meteor Lake because it's still ultra, so they're hoping consumers will just think it's the same thing. Is actually kind of what I've heard, if you can believe it. But anyway, sorry. I think AMD could make a really compelling argument of like, okay, look, here's this i9 14900K HX, you know, with an RTX 5070 laptop for like for like 2 grand, 2,500 or something. All right, 2 grand for that, or 2 grand for Strix Halo laptop. Now, hear us out. Or let's say they're probably both gonna be 2,500 actually. Hear us out on this. I know the 5070 laptop edition GPU is like 30-50% faster than Strix Halo. We know. But hear us out. Your CPU, we put Vcache. You have 16 cores of Zen 5 versus 8 cores of Raptor Cove for gaming, which was all it is. The E cores aren't really helping there. You've 8 cores of a 10 nanometer architecture or 16 cores of Vcache Zen 5. I know if you're gaming in 4K on your laptop, the 5070 is going to win. But if you're in 1080p or even just 1440p, honestly, like I gamed on a 7600 recently. This will be probably a little stronger than that. It kills 1440p in my opinion. Um, you know, we're giving you something where if you turn down any settings, you're locking your frame rate. You can game at high refresh rates. It's going to be harder to do that here, and you're going to be using double the energy. So just the smoother frame rates, yes, turn down a couple settings, but you're going to use less energy. It's going to be smoother. It's going to be more stable. Go with Strix Halo. Actually, this is the better gaming package holistically. I think that's a compelling argument, and I think putting Vcache on it would make that argument easier to make. All right, let me move on to another subject here. Benjamin Cannon writes in, is there any update on the next-gen LGA 1851 CPU, or is it only Arrow Lake rebrand? Is it possible for Panther Lake S using Intel 18A at the end of 2025, or at least a new stepping for Arrow Lake? Let me see here. Just want to make sure I don't miss these questions because YouTube just tried to delete them. All right. Look, I already leaked, and I believe it was a month ago in the last live stream that Panther Lake seems to be coming to desktop. I think there's more evidence emerging from other rumor spheres that might be true. And I think it will be, it's 8 plus 16. It'll use, I believe, Cougar Cove, and Cougar Cove should be 5 to 10% faster than Lion Cove. I've been told it's closer to the bottom one of those numbers, though, like single digits, people, 5-6% maybe. IPC uplift, maybe a bit higher clocks, maybe a 20% efficiency increase. So you're getting more for less power. But that's it. And it's still supposedly going to use the same other non-compute tiles. So they're just swapping out the CPU tile to rush something out to be more competitive with Zen 5. If that's true, and I hope it's wrong, because I think they just need to ditch the Arrow Lake package. It just sucks. Dude, Intel, just make a monolithic Panther Lake. Your tiles failed, man. There's latency issues. But I'll digress on that. There's no way that's catching up to Right, the 9800X3D. I'm sorry, that ship has sailed. Like, I remember when we were talking about, like, "Ooh, maybe Arrow Lake will be 10% faster or 15% faster. Ooh, maybe the 9800X3D will only be 10% faster in gaming." That's not what's happened here. What we have here is a complete and utter gaming blowout from AMD with the 9800X3D. It's not beating Arrow Lake by 5%, 10%. It's beating it by 15 to 35%. Do I think Panther Lake's going to increase gaming performance over Arrow Lake by 40%? No, good, but that's what it would have to take for a firm victory. So I think Intel's out of gaming maybe forever. I mean, it sucks to admit, right? But think about it. That's such a mountain to climb. AMD is now at least 15% faster than Arrow Lake in gaming. A lot of averages like hardware unboxed over 30%. So if Panther Lake is even 10% faster than Arrow Lake in gaming, and I don't think it will be, I think it'll be 5% or so. All right, so now what? We're like 30% behind. And then Nova, like I've heard, could be a 20-30% IPC increase. Could be. Who knows? It's Intel, but even that might not catch up. And then by then, AMD will have Zen 6 X3D. I think we have to accept that Intel's done and do it yourself. I mean, they're just so far behind in gaming now. I I doubt that Nova Lake would actually catch up. If it did, it'd be a tie. And that's before we talk about Zen 6. So it's sad from the perspective of Intel, but it is what it is. And I don't sugarcoat things here. You know, I told you that Arc wasn't looking good and that Battlemage would probably be the last limited launch of dedicated. And Pat just confirmed it in earnings. Look it up. It's got a lot of hate for some of this stuff, guys, but I just tell you what's actually happening. I'm not going to lie to you. Aiden FS writes in, what can Intel do to get a great gaming i5 again? It's pretty clear gamers don't care about 8 E-cores, and the best gaming chips are binned as i9s with 16 E-cores they don't even want. I think the biggest mistake Intel made I don't know if it's E-cores itself, but putting that many E-cores on an i5. I mean, maybe I'm old school here, but does anyone remember the era of the i7 and the i5 before all this Ultra 9, i9 nonsense? Back in the day, I'm talking 10, maybe even 15 years ago by now, you would go, the i7 is there for the extra you might need. Like this was back when most gamers still gamed on a dual core and 4 cores was seen as a luxury. 6 cores was back then kind of seen how like honestly 24 cores are seen today. And you'd go, so you don't really need the hyper threading, but if you're really multitasking a lot, the i7's got you covered, but otherwise just get that i5 baby. What does it do? The things most apps use. At the time, most apps used 1 or 2 cores. 4 was seen as a luxury. You didn't have hyper threading, but whatever. It was very rare an app would use more than 4 cores effectively. I thought that was the point of the 5, right? The i5, wasn't the i5 supposed to be what you need to maximize most apps and not much more, which has made it great for gamers for the price. And something happened with Alder Lake where like I swear Intel just forgot that. Like, why were there E cores on there? Like, honestly, I personally think the i5 should have had 8 P cores and no E cores. And then I don't know, that maybe for yield reasons they couldn't do that because they had to disable at least some P cores for the i5. But that's what they did. They gave you all these E cores that people don't want. And in fact, I'd even go as far as to say I think Alder Lake should have been like 10 plus 4 total, Raptor like 12 plus 8, or even just 12 plus 4 again. Like no one needs a million E cores in the mid range. Or I don't know. All that does is make you in multi-threading. I think the i5s right now should be targeting 8 full cores, no E cores, because that's what they used to do. Back then, 4 threads, 4 cores, i5s, most apps did that. Right now, most apps use 8 threads at least. So you should have 8 full cores. You don't need the E cores. The i7 for creators or Cinebench drag racers, that's where you add the E cores for the more professional users. But I don't know. I feel like the i7s are kind of the new i5s, and the i5s are like in this weird no man's land where like it's if you want to lose gaming, but like not be the best at multi-threading. And AMD's over here just like, or you can get 8 cores for less, or you can get Vcache and it'll lose multi-threading, or you can get a cheaper 12 core. I don't know if you want multi-threading, but I guess my thoughts would be moving forward, and I don't think they're going to do this. I'm going to guess they're going to keep the same core count, 6 plus 8 for Ultra 5 Panther Lake. Would be if they can, Panther Lake should not have 16 E cores unless it's easy to do. It should have like 12 E cores and 10 P cores. And then the i5 should just be 8 plus 0. The i7 could be 10 plus 4. And the i9 could be, or Ultra 9, could be the 12 plus 12 or whatever, 10 plus 12, whatever they end up doing. Because that's i5s should have 8 full cores because that's what people in that segment are looking for. Most apps still just use 8 cores. So that's what the mid range should do. And it doesn't. All right, let's continue the questions here. Chris Rich writes in and says, one recent rumor that surprised me was the suggestion of AMD buying Intel. Let me add a new timestamp for this one. Don't worry, I'm going to get to the other questions. I just want to get through some of the merger stuff. Then I'll get to a lot of these questions about what people should buy right now. Let me see here. Intel buyout, we'll say, call this. So one recent rumor that surprised me was the suggestion AMD buying Intel or otherwise merging with them. The rumor is that supposedly sources in the US government are nudging AMD to consider merging with Intel to bail them out or something. But he says, let's say such a thing actually happened for whatever reason. What parts of Intel do you think AMD should keep longer term? Just the fabs with and the good engineers? Or are there specific products or designs you think are worth developing further? Well, so obviously you just crush any of the GPU crap. Take their IP, and put it in your catalog. Take the GPU engineers that are left in that ghost town of that department and just make the Radeon team bigger. Here's a few extra people to help work on this memory controller or that. That's what you would do. You do the same thing with the CPU engineers. We're going to fill them. They'll probably keep the design teams in Israel. And I would just take everything else at Intel that's like CPU designish and absorb it into the proper CPU design teams to just let them work faster with more people. And then just kind of gut everything else. I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what else you'd keep. I mean, they've already killed Optane, and wasn't there some rumor about selling Altera or something? They've kind of killed off most of the rest of their company. So that's what I think you do. Now, when it comes to the fabs, I don't know. That's AMD's done really well fabless. I wouldn't want to mess with that if I was Lisa Su. I would definitely sell off my non-US fabs, I think, to someone. I don't know, like maybe Samsung or TSMC would want to do like a partial buyout. Like maybe AMD would merge with Intel and say, okay, we're going to keep the Arizona fabs because that's a national security interest for us. Especially because if there's tariffs, guess what? We can make AMD CPUs cheaper for Americans in the country here. Like that's what I would do if I was AMD. And then I would just dump everything outside the United States because they do well with TSMC. It should just be there for a security reason. Like you could do this too. Like you could just use TSMC to make your chiplets for this cores and then just make IO dies. Just make Arizona an IO die factory or budget APU. So it's not like really competing with TSMC that hard. So you don't piss TSMC off that much. Like that's the type of thing that I would look to do. But I don't think they should keep all their fabs if they did merge with them. I just think it's proven this fabless model works better. KJM015 writes, and it says, following recent shortfalls at Intel, you broach the possibility of Intel facing a buyout or merger by some other company. Of the potential buyers, which do you think is the most capable of delivering true competition to AMD in the client CPU space? Is do-it-yourself desktop doomed to become a de facto AMD monopoly forever? No, and I just linked it. Nvidia is getting into CPU. Apple's in CPU. Qualcomm makes CPUs. Guys, if Intel fails, the market will be absorbed by other players that have more money and can hire the same engineers. I'm sorry. That's true. And I don't think Intel would completely fail so much as become an IBM situation. And what happened when IBM kind of collapsed and became a smaller company? Oh, yeah, all laptops disappeared. No, it's not what fucking happened. Of course, someone else made laptops. Someone else made CPUs. Like this argument is just ridiculous. Now, who do I think if someone were to the most capable of true competition? If someone were to buy Intel, I actually think there's two answers. I think the most logical merger on paper is actually Samsung. Samsung's it's a very good idea. Samsung's nodes and silicon manufacturing is failing. Like they're having to turn off factories, which it costs so much money to turn them back on. So that means they don't expect sales for months with some of these things. That's just terrible. Terrible indication of where they're at, which I hear the same thing. No one wants to work with Samsung anymore. They really botched a few nodes and were some people feel a little dishonest with what they were going to get when they bought capacity. So I think Samsung could really benefit from Intel's foundry engineers, which I think are some of the smartest people out there. And they could use it to revitalize themselves. Also, there's already Samsung fabs in the United States around Arizona and Texas, so that merger would be very effortless. Like right now, Samsung's poaching Intel engineers. Like, stop poaching, just become the same company. Like, that makes sense. You could also leverage Intel CPUs for making Samsung chips for phones, and then you become a much bigger competitor. Like, you kind of like become AMD again, except you have fabs. I think that makes sense. Samsung's just kind of like an Intel that's succeeding in some ways, but failing in fabs. Intel's succeeding in fabs, but no one's going to use an Intel fab because they're scared to. If it was a Samsung fab, now they might. I think that merger makes the most sense. Now, the other way to go about this, though, is that's the most logical one. But would the United States allow a merger between Intel and a Korean company? Maybe. I mean, tight ally, but I would say that the national security perspective, and I could see them pushing Apple to buy up Intel because Apple has the money outright to do it. And then you'd have Apple being able to make their phones at their fabs, and then they could probably just revitalize Intel's CPU design houses and kind of merge them. Just have two teams. We have the x86 team, the ARM team. It's all Apple Silicon now, or maybe they'd still brand it as Intel on desktop and laptop. There'd be some, I think, concerns about like, well, would Apple really want to be funding competition in laptop? I don't know. Like, I mean, I think it's conceivable. Actually, what you would see is Apple would kill off the laptop side and use Intel for like server and desktop stuff, and then use their own chips for laptops. But the only reason I could see that happening because it is a little messier than Samsung. Samsung makes more sense to me as Apple's a U.S. company, so for national security reasons, you might have the U.S. government go, yeah, we're going to allow this to happen because now we have fabs secured in the U.S. with a strong CPU company, Apple, that can bail out Intel for national security reasons. I could see that happening. Although, again, the rumor I heard is that some sort of merger or partial buyout of the fabs from Intel. The better route, the more likely it's Samsung. Um, High functioning autism boy, right? AI boy. You put in too many AIs in your name, man. I can't read it anymore. The sentiment towards Pat Gelsinger seemed to be extremely positive for several years there. But I get the feeling that with hindsight, it was just blunder after blunder, and people are finally realizing his leadership was probably not the correct choice. Do you think we were completely misguided to put faith in Pat? Well, I happen to know some people think that, that were like from the beginning, I don't think this guy's actually the right man for the job. I guess they get to say they were right maybe soon. I don't know. I think it's a little too early still to completely throw Pat away, but maybe they'll get to say I told you so. Um, but were we completely misguided to put faith in Pat? I don't actually think I'm the person a person who can answer that question. I didn't work at Intel. I talked to people that work at Intel. So all I could report to you is people at Intel like Pat. So the question is, were they wrong? Because me and the tech press can do is tell you what we're hearing, and what we were hearing were good things from people who knew the guy. But I don't know. I think that there is an argument to be made that they hired Pat because they wanted an engineer in charge of the company again. And actually, maybe they needed the previous guy. Let me make sure I have the right name because I don't. No, this is right. I don't know if he was great, but maybe they actually needed someone more like Bob Swan, and everyone called him a bean counter. Well, look what happened. Intel stopped counting beans and they're out of money. So I mean, I think there's an argument that we maybe should have had a little bit more ruthless of a person who cuts down the size of the company, only focuses on what you needs, lets the numbers actually guide Intel, listens to their customers, and then maybe you bring in Pat once the finances are good, right? Like I think Pat would have been the right engineer. I think Pat would have been the perfect CEO 15 years ago, but it's not 15 years ago. Like when you were almost a monopoly, that's when you put Pat in charge to run wild with acquisitions and building up stuff and competing in other places. But when you're kind of collapsing, I I was outspoken too that I was mad people called Bob Swan a bean counter. It's like, well, sometimes you need to count beans or you don't have any money. Clean Sweep writes him. Do you think we'll see a split in Vcache designs from AMD into professional gaming and gaming lines? Based on Dr. Ian Cuttress's video on the topic, it seems there's a ton of benefits for Vcache on top, while Vcache on bottom only benefits thermals, which only seems to benefit gamers. I can't say for sure, but I would point Ian into looking into the interviews with AMD engineers that said they wanted to put Vcache on the bottom from the start. They just didn't have the money to. If they wanted to put Vcache on the bottom from the start, that probably means they thought that would be better from the start. So that would be my answer to that one. XTX999 writes in and says, the M4 Mac Mini looks to be a killer at the price point it is at. Even though I don't need it, I briefly considered it, especially with my student discount. It's $499. Do you think this is the effect of Strix Halo? Do you think this will affect Strix Halo or many other mini PCs? So I really haven't looked into the M4 Mini much, but it is as usual gaming bench. It's as usual hard to find good comparison videos where they benchmark it um, against like AMD and Intel hardware. But from what I'm seeing here, at iMac, Apple, M4, yeah. So, but we got to look at non-synthetic gaming benchmarks, and that is, God dang it, it's like impossible. Can one person just benchmark a real game here and actually compare it to other stuff, not just previous Mac? Uh, oh, here we go. Oh, if this is true, then no, I don't think it will compete at all. So this is from 10 hours ago, so very, very recent. Uh, and I'm seeing a benchmark here. I'll try to put a link in the description once the stream ends. Uh, let me see. This. I'm seeing this thing lose pretty badly in gaming, though. Like, let me see. I think this is Dave 2D. It is. All right, I'm on Dave 2D's. So Cinebench, yeah, it's got good CPU performance, but show me the GPU, baby. Oh, I'm going to give up soon because there it is. So he is showing it. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I'm seeing this thing. Yeah, M4 Pro. I don't know. I'm seeing it looks like it's what, like double the performance of the M1 Pro, maybe a little better. But I'm not. Oh, but that is an RTX 4080. Okay. Oh, okay. So it's like an RTX 4080. This is not a very good representative benchmark. It's probably CPU bottleneck. But from what I'm seeing here, the 4080 is like 70 or 80% faster. So now let's go to RTX 4080 on Tech Power Up. And again, this is very rough math. He in this benchmark I'm seeing he used 1200p. It would be very CPU bottlenecked before GPU. But if I go down to half that performance, or I guess maybe 60% of it, let's see. So, and this is in one game. It's definitely CPU bottlenecking that 4080. I don't know. From what I'm seeing here, yeah, I don't think it's really going to edge out. And I could be wrong, forgive me if I end up wrong. But I don't see this having some giant edge in gaming performance. Um, and so it's cheaper, but it's competing with much weaker APUs overall than Strix Halo, I think. Like what is the core count of the M4 Pro core count? 14 core CPU. So yeah, I don't know. Um, I would want to see more benchmarks, but unfortunately, the early ones to me don't comprehensively paint a picture like this is better than Strix Halo in every way. I will say this though, it will make people think twice about getting crappy mini PCs, But as far as I can tell, I don't know. I think like this Minis Forum AI 370 Elite Mini here is probably going to hold its own to a certain degree. So we'll have to look at that. But yeah, at $600, you're definitely being a little aggressive there, more than usual. I will say this though, how much RAM does it come with for M4 Mini RAM? A tiny wonder. Man, some people really do. Okay, so it comes with 16 gigabytes at least. But again, so here's my problem. So I've got an AI 370 here. I haven't tested this yet. But if I look this up on Minis Forum, aren't they selling it for around 1,000? And like how much storage does it come with? Ooh. Is it like half a terabyte or something? I don't know. See, this is the issue. Yeah, it's about $1,000. So here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna say this is a $600 Mac mini. It has an M4 chip. And then over here, this thing is like 1,000, 1,100. Remember, if you want to get this, though, use off code Broken Silicon at minisforum.com. This comes with 32 gigabytes of RAM, guys. This comes with a 1 terabyte SSD. Apple might sell this for $600, but it doesn't come. And I'm gonna just hazard a guess you can't upgrade the mini. Am I right? I mean, so you can't just look at performance. And if I already use this for gaming, I know Apple makes better use of RAM in its operating system, but I'm sorry, 16 gigabytes it's not going to compete with Strix Halo. Strix Halo comes with 32 gigabytes minimum. There will be 64 gigabyte mini PCs, I bet, eventually, that have 16 cores, 32 threads. It's not really in the same tier. I think it's more so in the tier of like a budget, hot point, or eventually, like if they have the AI 9, 365 mini PCs, that's where it's going to bring some competition. But unless it comes with a terabyte and especially 32 gigabytes of RAM, it's hard for me to look at that and not just go, hey, it's way better than what Apple used to make. It's a decent price if you're looking to get an Apple product for doing Apple things. But unless it comes with 32 gigabytes, I'm not getting this to really compete in the same performance tiers, really, in a lot of the apps I use. But that is my early M4 opinion on that one. And I would not take that to be my full one. I'll have to, of course, actually look at it in depth for a Broken Silicon or some video or something. All right, let me get to these tipped questions that I've been failing to get to in a reasonable amount of time. So Kenneth Escalano writes in and says, "Hi, Moore's Law. I just want to ask if my 5600X with a 6700 XT is still relevant." Yeah, I mean, it's still stronger than the majority of PCs. It's still better than well, I mean, it depends because the CPU could be bottlenecked in some AAA games now, but it's, you're still getting, generally speaking, better than PS5 base performance, if not around the same. It's certainly relevant, but he says, should I upgrade to Zen 5 X3D on X670 and go to the 7800 XT, or wait for Late's Radeon? It all comes down to a good deal, and there are a lot of good deals right now. Again, I wouldn't personally get the super high end stuff because wait for the 5090, and RDNA 4 may make that look silly. But I've seen 7800 XTs go for hilarious prices open box. Yeah, so I see 470. It seems like the holiday rush is making them go up a little bit again, like we always see around this time. But if you can get a 7800 XT for 450, especially if it were to come with a game or something you want, I just think you do it now, man. I don't know. I think now would be the time to get it if you're wanting a game over the holidays. If you're still happy, though, then you don't need to. But I've said this spiel before. I definitely wouldn't get anything above a 7900 XT, probably just because I think those are going to look pretty silly once RDNA 4 comes out. But if you can get a 7900 XT for like 600, 630, a 7800 XT for 450, do it now. Especially if you can go to a Micro Center where they have these deals where they're just giving away RAM. All right, now let me scroll down. Let's see. Mookie X writes in, will tariffs result in a heated race between Intel getting their ship together in TSMC cracking the whip at the U.S. foundries? Maybe. Yeah, probably. Maybe give global foundries a reason to stop dying on the 12 nanometer hill. That's probably true as well. My answer would be yes to everything. Yeah, it would. It absolutely would. I would say to everything you just said. Let me put here shopping advice. All right, let me see here. Samson writes in, I play on a 4090 and a 7900 X3D at 4K 120 hertz. I'm thinking of upgrading to the 9800 X3D. I'm tired of core parking. I think it hurts my 1%. Well, I would, yeah. I mean, screw it, right? What? You'll sell the 7900 X3D for what on eBay? Let's see. Let's have fun here, people. This is the shopping advice section, after all. 7900 X3D. Really? You can sell for that much, huh? I want that, and I want used. Yeah, it seems like you can sell that for $400 used, maybe certainly 350. I would upgrade. I would upgrade because you're going to get the same multi-threading performance, basically, and then you're going to get quite a big gaming performance uplift, and then peace of mind. I would sell it now. I would do it. and do it again, maybe at Micro Center, because then you'll get 32 gigabytes of RAM. Just sell that. Like, yeah, I would do, especially if you got the Micro Center deal, you get the free RAM that you can sell easily on the used market. I would do it now. Spencer Walker 21 writes in, hypothetical top end Steam Deck 2 early 2026 TDP that goes 30 watts while matching Asus with an 80-watt battery. Uh I don't know about that. If I were to guess, they're going to try to have a similar form factor, if not maybe even make it a little smaller. Um I don't know. Maybe a little bigger battery, but I think the Switch 2 may make them reconsider that, because even though it's going to come out, I don't know, in I guess January, February, March next year, because Nintendo's taking forever. I think it is going to match Steam Deck performance, generally speaking, or at least it'll be perceived by the market to be in the same ballpark. It will obviously won't be able to do as high frame rates, but um, I think it will be able to do better image quality than the Steam Deck. Yeah, the Switch 2 will, and the Switch. I gotta keep mixing them up. The Switch 2 also will be, I think, thinner, lighter, and people will appreciate that. And I would guess that with the Steam Deck 2, they're gonna go, okay, well, we nailed what it needed to do, and we made it as big as it could be. I don't think people want bigger than that. And I think if I were to guess, actually, they'd probably target lowering the power slightly and making it a little thinner. That'd be my guess with the Steam Deck 2, but I'm not 100% sure on that or anything. Okay, someone gave me a thumbs up. Let's see. And then, okay, I don't. Oh, let's see. Oh, no, here they are. It's like, I'm pretty sure there's other questions. All right. Bushwhacked 487 says, "Are you hearing any whispers about whether Zen 6 will be on AM5?" Yeah, it should be on AM5. I've been talking about Zen 6 on AM5 for a while now. Am I 100% sure? No, but it's not even really finalized. Well, actually, it's getting close to there by now, but everyone's told me it should be on AM5. XPod X writes in and says, "Do you think the i9 9900K will handle the 5090 at 4K 144 hertz?" Guys, come on. So here's what I'm gonna say. I wonder if they still benchmark the 9900K on Tech Power Up in their reviews. It'd be nice if they did, just as like a reminder of where things are. But let me see. Let me go to benchmarks there. I don't see it, but I do see Zen Plus, which I would say is close to there. They have Rocket Lake still. So you would say it's probably in between Rocket Lake, right, and Zen Plus performance. You are talking about something that is verging on 40% to a third the performance of a 9800 X3D. Yeah, so and I'll say this too. So right now I'm actually using a 240 hertz monitor. That the ad for it should come out in a month or so, maybe a couple weeks. It's a KTC one. It's OLED 240 hertz 1440p. My 4K 120 hertz color accurate monitor is now to the side. I'm trying it out though. I'm giving 1440p a freshman try, because it has OLED and that does make it look sharper to me. And maybe I traded clarity slightly for just much better color. And because of this, I still, as I've mentioned, have a 5950X. Yes, that is bottlenecking the 4090 at a 240 hertz resolution. Pretty bad. It's to the point that I just don't bother with 240. I just cap at 160. And it's FreeSync or G-Sync compatible monitor. So whatever. It's just a buttery 160. Some games drops to 140-ish, 150. But so put that in perspective. I'm now sure that a 5950X caps at around 160 hertz in most games. Certainly some of them are way higher than that. But there's some where it drops below 50 here and there. Okay, well, your CPU, your CPU, if I use Tech Power Up here, what do we got? There's mine, 5950X. I mean, yeah, I would say yours. That's right. Is that Rocket Lake? No, yeah, that 1100's Rocket Lake. I would say your CPU is a solid 20% weaker. So maybe you could eke out 144 in some games, but you only have 8 cores too, so you don't get the mulligan of being able to dynamically shift between more cores like me. Yeah, definitely going to bottleneck the 5090 there. I think Zen 3 should be thought of as still pretty good for 120 hertz gaming. You're fine, It's pretty good. Zen 4 gets you to that like 165, 200 hertz, and Zen 5 X3D is the 240 hertz. Okay, we can do things crazy now. You're weaker than the one where I would say 120 is okay, and you're talking about 144 hertz. Uh, will a lot of games still work at 144? Absolutely. But a lot of them won't. And if you're going to spend $2,500 or whatever on a 5090, yeah, I know. I'm the guy who still uses Zen 3 with a 4090, but that is where it's like you're getting a little ridiculous, I think. I rebuild, do it. Get a new system first. You'll probably more notice a 4090. A 4090 with a 9800 X3D will probably game better in 4K than a 5090 if you're trying to push past 100 hertz. So I would definitely say I'm not afraid for the CPU to bottleneck things a little bit. GPU comes first, but that is getting to kind of the absurd area, in my opinion. Logan B writes in and says, "Hi, Tom. For someone looking to move up from 4K 60 to 4K 120, how would you break down a budget between display and video card?" So the rule of thumb, I remember when Paul's Hardware used to be the Newegg guy. Does anyone remember that? I remember he had this rule of thumb where I think he said spend the same on the CPU as the GPU or something. And I think that's the most you should spend if you're a gamer. I personally put it another. I've always thought you should spend half as much, right? And it doesn't mean you have to. Like at a certain point, buying a stronger CPU does nothing for you, or there isn't a better one. This isn't like where Intel was trying to charge you like $1,000 for a 6 core or like really milk that top quad core. At a certain point, 9800 X3D is under $500. You're not even doing better than that. So I kind of think of it as half as much. And so let me think of some combinations there. So you would get a 5700X 3D with like a 6800. Yeah, that makes sense to me, doesn't it? Right? Because like a 5700X 3D is $180 a Micro Center. Check them to support the channel. And then I think you can still get an RX. Let me see here, 6800. Because that's been my budget champion for a while now is the 6800. As long as it's 350. So yeah, I think you spend about half as much. If you're getting a 6800, I don't think you need to get even Zen 4 unless you want to. But then even though you can go down to like a 7600, then you're on AM5. And then, let's say you get a 7800 XT. All right. Well, now, yeah, maybe we bump it up to like a 7700X, which is stronger than a 5700, by the way. And then you go, okay, well, I'm going to get a 4080. Okay. Well, you should probably just get a 9800 X3D at that point. So that's what I would say. If you're planning to get any graphics card above like a 7900 XT, I kind of think you just get the 9800 X3D or something like that because you don't need to spend as much on the CPU as the GPU unless you're using it for something else. The only reason I have a 16 core is because I do so much work on this with so many apps, recording things, doing it at the same time. That'd be the only reason I do. And I might even just move to a 9800 X3D because right now, if I open up Task Manager, it used to be the case with the Zen 2 16 core that, it'd fill up easy. Yeah, I don't think I need more multi-threading. I don't. I really don't think I probably do because Zen 5's simultaneous multi-threading works so goddamn well. All right, so that is that reader mail there. All right, let me keep scrolling down. I think we had another question. Let's see. There's one. Oh, let's see. For Fire Darkness says, I got an internship at one of the big three you talk about due to bringing up code names you leak to their engineers. Just wanted to say thanks. That's very, very funny. Well, very good for you. Good for you. Yeah, I've got, it's funny how many times I've got some of my sources will bring up things I've told them about other companies to their coworkers. And that will make them be taken more seriously amongst their other coworkers or amongst the boss. Like, oh yeah, we are working on that. You must really pay attention to the meetings or something. Like, good for you, man. Let me see. Okay, I've got a question here from Shay from the Patreon. He says, do you think chiplets are making it easier for AMD to make UDNA products with different memory controllers for HBM and GDDR7? Was the memory controller a leading reason for RDNA CDNA split in the first place? I don't know if it was like a leading reason, But yeah, I mean, that makes the idea, right? So again, just to recap everybody here. Like AMD has said that they are going to merge their Radeon RDNA and client and the professional market CDNA together and make UDNA, much like they did with the HD 7000 series through, I mean, what? Through Vega, the GCN idea. I think it made a lot of sense for AMD in the recent whatever to try making professional and AI and data center a separate architecture from gaming. But now with how complex and expensive it is to make these things, I think it makes sense to merge it again so that you make one strong chip. And then if it makes sense to launch it to consumers, you launch it to consumers. If it doesn't make sense, then, you know, you don't have to waste all this money, or you didn't waste money making some gaming chip no one wants, because now you can sell an AI. And that's what Nvidia is doing right now with the 4090. Let me see here. Yeah, turn off autofocus. You know, because Nvidia, you know, let's say GPU sales go down, which they are right now. Whatever, just sell the 4090 dies into AI. You know, and I think AMD wants to be able to do that moving forward. Now, before there were rumors that they could have various memory controller chiplets with like RDNA 3, and RDNA 3 is mostly for gaming, so that didn't really make sense. But it is an interesting point. Do I think, you know, the reason the memory controller was the leading reason for RDNA and CDNA to split in the first place? I think they had more reasons for that, but you know, being able to have memory controllers on chiplets, I do think there's an argument there that makes more sense to merge the architectures again. So I don't think that's the reason, but I think that's an interesting argument. And I would be surprised if, like with RDNA 5, or who knows if that's called UDNA or whatever comes after that, UDNA didn't do that, where they're like, yep, here's the HBM memory controller, here's the GDDR7 memory controller, you know. Okay. So I want to bring this up again here. Jordan, I've seen some weirdos spamming a paper launch. It's not a paper launch. It isn't. Here we go. We're gonna do at Jordan 380. Here you go, man. If you go to Madison Heights, Michigan right now, it says there are 25 9800 X3Ds in stock. It is not a paper launch at all. It may have sold out where you are. It is not a paper launch. um, Josh A writes in, have you heard anything about 9950 X3D performance, and or if both dies are going to be X3D so we don't have to deal with OS thread scheduling nonsense? I would suggest that they're going to move past the Xbox game bar either way. You know, I heard, I leaked this a while ago. I heard that maybe AMD will actually be putting Vcache on both CCDs, but unfortunately, I cannot tell you I'm still 100% sure. It sounds like it's plausibly going to happen, but I really can't say more than that, except that I heard they were from multiple people. Yeah, because I heard it from one person first, and then I talked to someone at AMD that said they had attended meetings where they were like, we should put Vcache on both CCDs. I just can't, to this day, for some reason, still tell you with 100% certainty of that. So let me see here. 5090 leak news. Not really, guys. We're in November. I have leaked that they're probably shipping the 5090 and 5080 to the US now. That's mostly to avoid tariffs and get in the country before, I guess, we just decide to jack up prices. And if Nvidia really wanted to launch it December, they could. It still kind of doesn't seem to me like there's going to be a teaser and then a CES launch, though, right? But it is up to AMD, or I'm sorry, Nvidia, or AMD when it's an AMD product, when they exactly want to launch it, you know. And I've said for a long time, Nvidia can launch these things pretty much whenever they want. It's just a matter of if they want to, and so far they haven't wanted to. Let me see here. Is there any chance that Intel Bartlett Lake will be able to? Maybe, but who cares about Bartlett Lake? Like this, what are we talking about? That's like a cope. I feel like a lot of the Bartlett Lake leaks were like cope leaks. Like, oh, Air Lake's not as good, but guess what? We'll get Bartlett Lake. What, are Alder Lake again? Who cares about these Intel CPUs, guys? Who would buy Bartlett Lake when you can get $250 Zen 4 8 cores and then 9800X 3D that will just probably beat it at almost everything for 480. Like, what are you talking about? um, duh, duh, duh. Let's see. Let's see. I see some arguing, rando comments. All right. I think I've gotten through what I need to. Let me just make sure you hit the like button, everybody. And let me just take another 5 to 10 minutes to answer a final question. So this is where I go. If you still want to ask a tipped question, put in the tipped question now. And then if you're in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord in the after video chat section, put in any final questions you want to put there right now. So yeah, if you're a patron, you can put in free questions right now at the last minute. And remember, just $2 gets you access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, die shrinks. Like you don't. That's the most effective way to support the channel and also be able to interact the most for less money. Let me see here. Oh, here's one. Wool Red writes in and says, any chance AMD undercuts Nvidia with UDNA? I mean, this is something coming out years from now, man. But AMD has failed on this multiple. I mean, RDNA 4's launch is going to be very telling. That's my opinion on this one. It's going to be very, very telling how they decide to handle aggressiveness because it sounds very good. And what we've seen from the PS5 Pro is actually pretty impressive, right? It uses about the same amount of energy as a PS5 while giving you, depending on how you look at it, like substantially more performance. And they didn't even give it Vcache, same amount of memory. Think about what that means for efficiency. And the ray tracing seems to be there. NX Gamer says this thing ray traces like a 4070 Super or better. So think about that. AMD has it. RDNA 4, once they have the full consumer version with Vcache, I think this thing is at least 7900 XT raster, which by the way is 4080 rasters. People forget the 7900 XT in pure rasters, maybe stronger than a 4080. And they're going to give you probably 4070 Ti super ray tracing at least. That's a compelling product even at $600 because at that point you'd be competing with Nvidia products that probably have less RAM, probably are a little weaker, but I think for AMD to really nail it, $500, and it's less about price performance and more about $500 is just the magic number. People want $499 before they put it in their cart. They like that round half of a grand, not most of a grand, half of a grand. So your question about UDNA pricing, who knows? I have no clue. I'm not going to pretend I do. But if we see RDNA 4 get listed for $499, match the 4080 or even be close to it and sell like hotcakes, I think that's where AMD is going to go, okay, well, we always need to nail the 499 card. The 7800 X30 sell, the 7800 XT sold well. By the way, I got an update from retail today. 7800 XT is selling well. So is the 4070 Super. High end is just, no one really wants high end stuff, high end GPUs right now. I should say no, and most people don't. So AMD's already seen the 7800 XT sell incredibly well for an AMD graphics card. Now, if they do it again, they'll see that. So I think hopefully they learn the right lesson and go, we need a good $500 card in our lineup every time. That is what people look for when they buy a Radeon. And if they do it again, I bet it will work well again. And then you'll see that with UDNA. But if AMD sells it for 600, who knows? Because that means they might have not learned the lesson or something. I don't know. Let me see here. Do you think AMD and Nvidia will eat the tariffs? No. They'll pass on. Prices will go up. I think what they would try to do is to get some cronyism backroom deal to have lower tariffs, which might happen. But if they have to pay more, they're going to pass on at least some of that deal. No, I'm not seeing any more questions from the Moore's Law is Dead Discord. Schengen, no way it's 500 matching the 4080. Hey, I agree they'll probably do 600, but I would hope they try to have a great $500 product. So even if like the 8800 XT was 600, I would hope the 8700 XT is still 16 gigabytes. Like, hear me out. Even if the 8800 XT is a 16 gigabyte card for 600, if they still gave the 8700 XT 16 gigabytes and cut it down a little bit, like it was 90% of the performance, so you get like 4070 Ti super performance for 500, I'd still say that's good. So hopefully they'll at least do that. But they need to nail the $500 card, even if it's not the 8800 XT. Cupcakeable writes in and says, "Have you talked about the die size of the Pro versus the Slim?" No, I I probably did in some video a while ago, but there'd be no reason to talk about that. We need to see a teardown. If it is the same size, are you hoping? I don't think it's very big though. Well, let me look at it. Hasn't someone done that by now? Am I just an idiot? You'd think so. PS5 Pro die size. Someone must turn this down. Yeah, so it's 260 millimeters squared. That doesn't surprise me. So it's about the same die size as the PS5. Yeah. So does it make you feel like Sony is milking? Well, I mean, I've been very outspoken, guys, that Sony. I don't know if we use the term milking, because it's hard for me to call the PS5 Pro milking when Nvidia is charging $2,000 for graphics cards. It's like that's milking, but you know, they're definitely making more margin. I think they're probably, it is 4 nanometer though, guys, instead of 6. So you're looking at like 50% more silicon cost there, I think at least. Just off of the top of my head. I mean, yeah, I think that's another 50, another like $100 in silicon, maybe. Add a couple of gigabytes of RAM on 10, a few more high quality components, another $30 for the SSD. I think it does cost them, an extra $100 at least to make the PS5 Pro. Now I think the PS5 could probably afford to be sold for $400 though, which is the issue I have here. So I think they would be a little generous to sell it for 500. I think they'd probably be in line with the PS5 base if it was 550 or 600. And then yeah, there's that $100 tax on top of it. So would I call it milking? I would call it definitely not being generous. I would not say it's like I don't think there's like a 100% margin though here, guys. If I were to guess, they have like a 30% margin, which I believe is kind of what they wanted, at least with the PSVR 2. So I think there's something going on here with I almost called them Nvidia, 40 and slip, with Sony, similar to AMD, where AMD said we always want like a 45% margin. I don't know what it is with Sony. It's probably somewhere between 30 and 50%. And they're like, this is what we're going to do moving forward because we can. So I wouldn't call it milking. I just wouldn't call it being generous anymore because they don't feel like they have to be. Milking would have been 800 or something like that, because you really are still getting, I mean, put things in perspective. There would be some people that would go, well, 260 millimeter squared isn't a very big die. I mean, guys, like, for being honest, the 4070 Ti has a die size that's like what, 10% bigger than that. They sold that shit for $800. So put that in perspective. Sony's selling an entire system that uses 10% less silicon than an $800 Nvidia GPU. That is milking. And the saddest thing is, and Sony's even giving you more RAM. They have a 12 gigabyte GPU. They're not milking. Nvidia is milking, but they're making reasonable margins on it. That is the best way I could put it. And last I checked, the 4070 Ti didn't come with a disk drive either. Funny joke there for me at the end there. Someone says, well, they should have included the disk drive. I think that if anything, you'd just say they should lower the price. I think not including the disk drive, but making it cheaper makes more sense to me when most people don't seem to use them anymore. I think the hope they might, let me see here. I think they could have gone. Yeah, but I'm told it's selling well. Let me say that sale. Yeah, what I've been told from people in retail is the PS5 Pro is selling well. And that the largest reason that it's in stock in a lot of places still is because they made a lot of them. Like, I was told by someone at Best Buy that they just have like crates of these things. Like, no, they're like, no, no, no. They really did make a lot of these things. Like, they apparently thought this would be a hit, and it seems to be doing okay. Look at this. Perfect timing. I just checked with a source in retail. They said, we have already sold 80% of the PS5 Pro's inventory between the pre-orders and the in-store/online sales. Oh, wow. So that's online accounted for too. So it's like a company-wide thing. Yeah. So yeah, obviously I won't say who that is. There's a few retailers, more than a few retailers I talk to, but obviously if I said online, and it can only be a handful of US companies, but someone just told me they've sold 80% of them. Whether it's like Walmart or Target, or I won't say, they've sold 80% of the PS5 Pros in 2 days, and they had a ton of stock. Yeah, I don't know. That just tells me it's selling well. I guess maybe Sony was, at least for now, wasn't wrong about the price for them, I guess. So I don't know though. I'm not seeing any other questions. I kind of ended this with a last minute leak here, and I think that's where I'm gonna close it. So yep. Thank you everybody for watching this live stream. Guys, seriously, like the video, share the video, tell your friends about this. Make sure, please, all 1,200 of you before you sign off, double check that you're subscribed to the Moore's Law Said YouTube channel. I implore you. That helps the channel so much. It is something that affects the algorithm. Some people say it doesn't. I just watch your videos. Wrong. I've noticed it. If subscribers aren't growing as fast, my content isn't recommended as often. I'm now 100% sure of that. I can see the trends, from what I've done with shorts and stuff recently. So please make sure you're subscribed, share it, and all of that. And of course, join the Patreon, please. You'll be able to ask the next guest NX Gamer questions. He has a PS5 Pro. I think he's had one for over a week. He does extensive testing. And also, he's like a chip engineer who can answer Zen 5 and Arrow Lake questions as well. You'll be able to ask him questions at the lowest tier of the Patreon. So please join the Patreon as well. For everyone else, though, you made it hours into a live stream here where I had to mess with my tablet. So that must be you're a fan. And because of that, thank you for watching. Have a great weekend, everybody.